right, happy Wednesday it is. Good afternoon, everybody. I've had the opportunity, as a number of my colleagues have had, to speak with Senator McConnell. He is in good spirits, doing well, and anxious to get back here, and we're anxious to have him back. This week, we are talking about the 1991 and 2002 AUMFs, or authorizations for the use of military force. There's legislation that would repeal both of those, and while I personally think they serve important legal and precedential functions when it comes to the war on terror, there is a diversity of opinion among Republicans on that subject. But the one thing that we do agree on is we've got to have a strong national defense, and that America's got to continue to provide leadership in the global war on terror. The other thing we agree on is that this is an important policy matter, and that we need to make sure that we have a robust amendment process. And so there are a number of amendments that have been proposed by members on our side, all of which I think get at the core issues around the AUMF. And so I'm hopeful that we'll be able to have a robust amendment process and discussion about some of those issues before the bill's finally voted on. The one other thing I'll mention is I think everybody knows that the President's budget is being considered by committees, not on the floor, but off the floor this week. And there are a number of our committees that are taking looks at various aspects of that. The one thing I think Republicans agree on is the President's budget spends too much, taxes too much, borrows too much, and underfunds our most important priority, which is national security. And so our members will be making that argument in I think, a very expansive way over the course of the next few weeks as the President's budget is considered here. But I would also say that the Democrats who have been in the Senate attacking House Republicans for not having a budget haven't put a budget here together either. And we would welcome the opportunity, if they want to vote on the President's budget, because I think when the American people find out what's in it, they're going to hate it.
Well, as we talk about the President's budget, what this President is doing to the United States is irreversibly bad. Families all across the country are living in a state of stress. That's because our nation's economy is in distress. 3 out of 4 Americans say that the economy is bad. And under Joe Biden, people are faced with basically the highest cost and expenses of living that they've ever faced before. And when it comes to interest rates have risen faster in the last year or so than they have in 2 generations. And the Biden budget's goal is more of the same: taxing, spending, borrowing. Last week it was confirmed that under Joe Biden's presidency, prices for the American families that they're paying for things is up 15% compared to the day that he took office. So what we're seeing are families' paychecks are being wiped out today. We're seeing that their retirement savings are being wiped out for the future. So we have members of the cabinet coming to Capitol Hill, coming to Congress this week, trying to defend Joe Biden's bloated budget. We have the Secretary of Health and Human Services this morning in Finance. We have the Secretary of State this afternoon in the Foreign Relations Committee. They are both executing a program for an administration that is radical and reckless. Last week, the Secretary of Treasury, Janet Yellen, was here, and she testified, wrongly so, misleadingly so, saying that the President was doing all that he could. Clearly, that's not the case. He's not doing all that he could to deal with the pain and the problems and the heartache that are facing American families. But yet the Democrats, once again, are doubling down with taxes and spending. And Joe Biden and the Democrats are completely out of touch with the American people in terms of their hopes, their dreams, and the pain that they're suffering under Joe Biden's economy.
In a world where we talk much about a number of our adversaries and the significance to our country, we need to recognize that China is our #1 pacing threat. The Chinese Communist Party is everywhere. It's not just in the Indo-Pacific region. It is in our own backyard. And we see this through many examples. One, the Chinese, they have been purchasing valuable farmland all across the United States of America. If you add up all of the acres of Chinese-owned farmland, it is nearly the size of my home state of Iowa. That's a lot of land, folks, a lot of valuable land. Number two, the Chinese are sending precursors to fentanyl into Mexico. So whether they are manufacturing it and smuggling it into the United States or sending it into Mexico and getting it over an open border, they are affecting every community in the United States with their fentanyl. And then as well, they are mining data that is collected through various programs and apps like TikTok, which Senator Rubio and I are working on a bill to help solve that issue. But again, the Chinese are everywhere, and we need to be wary of what they are doing here in the United States. So whether it is affecting our communities, whether it's affecting our national security, whether it's affecting our families, I'm going to continue to fight against this Chinese influence, and I hope my colleagues will do the same.
This past weekend, I joined a bicameral, bipartisan CODAL to Mexico to talk to AMLO, the president of Mexico, López Obrador. We had a very extensive meeting with him, a 4-hour meeting on Sunday, where we talked about a lot of the issues that Joni mentioned, one, fentanyl being that, but other issues affecting the relationship and the way that we can work together better as two countries to fight on several fronts. Certainly on the drug issue, we were very frank with him about our concerns about all the fentanyl flowing into our country. He told us that he would go directly and forcefully to the Chinese government to try to stop the flow or disrupt the flow of the precursor chemicals that are coming in to the ports, into Mexico, and then across our border and killing, in my case, over 1,100 West Virginians last year alone by fentanyl. We felt like this was an important statement by the president and a commitment for both of us to work together on a difficult issue. Migration. Title 42 is going to go away in May. What's going to happen to the already chaotic border between the United States and Mexico? How can we help Mexico? How can Mexico help us? We got into a lot of technology. We got into a lot of workforce issues. We talked a lot about the cartels and the human trafficking. But again, we tried to be positive in terms of trying to find solutions rather than just constantly identifying the problems that we have and that we see at that border, because they're massive. And so the other issue was the economic issue. There's going to be a lot of onshoring and onshoring. We're onshoring a lot of our jobs back into the United States, certainly back into North America collectively with Mexico, United States, and Canada. USMCA was passed and signed by President Trump, and it has, I think, resulted in some very good and positive economic impacts both in Mexico and in this country and in Canada with the partnership that we see. So I appreciate Senator Cornyn put the CODAL together. It was very effective. And I'd also like to give a good shout out to our incredible Ambassador Salazar in Mexico. He is not only an excellent human being, but he's just a fine public servant who really led us, I think, to make some tremendous conversations and tremendous better understandings between the two countries. Thank you.
Just this past week, President Biden demonstrated how far left he's willing to go. He vetoed a bipartisan bill that would have protected Montanans' retirement savings just to satisfy the left's agenda. This is an important issue. Think about for seniors across America who worry about their retirement savings accounts, worry about what's in their IRAs. The focus should be on increasing the return on investment, not appeasing these far-left fringe groups. It is about shareholders. When you invest in a company, you want to see the highest return on that investment and not have a focus on high return be tainted by distractions of the ESG movement. And we're seeing how radical and far left this movement is. I mean, folks back home in Montana can't believe you have people here in Washington driven by this green hallucination of the far left coming for gas stoves. You're the President of the United States clamoring for grabbing guns. I was censored on my Twitter account because of a beautiful hunting picture I have with my wife and myself and an antelope. And now they're coming for our retirement savings as well. These left radical whims are a threat to our way of life in places like Montana.
As Trump's legal problems continue to swirl, would you be comfortable if he became the party's 2024 nominee?
That's a hypothetical question that's a long ways off. And we've got, a number of candidates who we're looking at. Some are already in that race. And so I don't think that it's in any Republican's best interest right now to speculate about what might happen in a Republican primary. But I expect it'll be a very robust conversation.
The House of Representatives is going to consider this parental Bill of Rights here. I know that this probably won't come up in the Senate. Do you think there's any effort as an amendment to the budget or something like that, since this is something that seems to be important to Republicans, to try to attach that, maybe try to get Democrats to take a tough vote on something related to that because of some of the ruckuses at the school board meetings we saw in the past couple of years?
Well, one thing I can tell you is that our members are very interested in the role that parents have in their children's education and upbringing, and I think that that issue has been raised in a lot of heavily Democrat governors, Democrat legislators across this country who, in many ways, I think have undermined the right of parents to put their kids first and foremost when it comes to their education. So I don't know exactly what that looks like, a parent's Bill of Rights, but my guess is if we have some vehicle over here that is open to amendment, I wouldn't be surprised if we have some members who want to address that issue. I don't know exactly, again, what that looks like in the House. Yeah. Well, I think the House, I try to comment on the House. Got a number of former House members here, and I know when I was over there, I didn't like being lectured by the Senate. The House is going to handle matters their way, but I do think that there are questions that are being asked by a lot of our members, and for that matter, people all across the country, about the prioritization of this DA, of this issue, over what are very current and real law enforcement issues in their city. And I think that's a fair question to raise.
Senator, Homeland Security Secretary is touting going after the fentanyl dealers and things like that, and talking about this task force that he created. Is it too little, too late of the Biden administration actually doing something now about the fentanyl crisis?
Well, I'll believe it when I see it if they actually do something. And you saw Senator Capito talked about, a number of us have been down there. We've seen how very real these trafficking issues are, whether it's drugs, weapons, human trafficking, and particularly with respect to fentanyl. It seems like at least maybe some of these issues are starting to cross the radar screen of the current administration. That is a welcome development, but I always, I think you judge people by what they do, not by what they say. And the rhetoric out of this administration oftentimes is very different from their actions. So we'll see what they do to follow up. Yep.
Have you seen any progress on the issue of the debt limit and how to resolve it? And if the stalemate between the President and the Speaker persists, do you anticipate Senate Republicans might have to step in?
As of right now, I think what Senate Republicans are doing is supporting our counterparts in the House of Representatives and the leadership and their efforts to negotiate a deal with the White House. And I can't speak to the current progress of that, but I do know that it is important, one, that we not default, but two, that we have a meaningful conversation around the debt, spending reforms, and I'm hopeful the administration will, in good faith and earnestly, reach out to and work with House Republicans to address that issue. And it hasn't happened just yet, but I'm hopeful that it will, and as typically the case around here, sometimes it takes a little bit of pressure, to get people to the table. But the administration initially, as you know, their initial reaction was, we're not going to negotiate. That is not a realistic or viable approach to what is a major issue in front of this country.
Senator, on TikTok,